All right, so our first step in assembling the arms, we're gonna need this belt, and we're gonna need the spool from inside of our arms. And we're basically gonna be gluing these two parts together. We're gonna glue these first so that basically we can have the glue be drying. We're just gonna start off with that. And we're gonna repeat this step 4 times. So we're gonna have 4 arms and 4 belts. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna open up this package. We're gonna take our belt out. And before we glue anything, it's nice just to check to make sure that the belt is going to slot in there smoothly. So that one looks good to go. If it doesn't fit smoothly, actually a little stuck now. If it doesn't fit smoothly, you can see based on the way the factory trims this end, it can help to retrim that end. It's just nice to check that before we put the glue in. All right, so now we're gonna take our glue bottle and we're gonna put just a little drop of glue in this slot. And then we're gonna take our belt and we're gonna put it in there. And we wanna make sure that our belt is all the way in so it's below, we wanna make sure our belt is all the way in so it's below this top edge here. Now we're gonna repeat that process 4 times, 3 more times. And a fingernail or a small screwdriver or something can be helpful just in pushing that belt all the way in there. Great. So now we have all 4 of our belts drying, and we can set those aside and wait for that glue to dry. The other thing that we need to glue is these rollers, and we're gonna add magnets to 4 of them. So let's get 4 of our rollers. And our magnets are gonna be stuck to our gears here. They're magnetic. So basically what we need to do is we need to glue a magnet into each roller. And you'll see that the roller has 2 ends. There's one end which is deep and one end which is shallow and has a small recess for that magnet to sit in. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna take our glue, put a little bit of glue in our recess, and then we're gonna take one of our magnets, press it in there. Make sure it's all the way down. So it should be recessed in there just like that. And when you set these down to dry, be careful about putting them like right next to each other because they'll jump and glue them and magnet themselves together and it can pull the magnet out before the glue dries. So just when we're setting these down to dry, just place them a little bit further apart than you think you need to. We want to make sure that these magnets are glued in really solid because these magnets, if this roller will track the belt, will roll along the belt to measure exactly how much belt has been extended out. And then the magnet is how the machine actually measures that. So if there's any slip, if these are not glued all the way in place, if there's any slip between the magnet and the roller, we'll lose accuracy. So it's important that these be glued in place. They won't be there's no force acting on them while the machine is being used, but there is some vibration. So we just want to make sure that these are permanently attached together. Oh, almost glued my fingers together. Great, so now we have our 4 rollers glued and we are done with our glue. We can set these aside to dry and we can work on a different part of the build process. Next, we're going to begin assembling the arm. And the first step in that process is we need to add the bolts to one side and the nuts to the other side. You'll notice that we've got a couple of different types of bolts in our hardware bag. you can see that there's some that have Loctite applied and some that don't. We want to use the ones that do not have the Loctite applied. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take some of our lock nuts and we're going to press them into our arm. And these are going to be a tight fit. So we're just going to get started this way. And with these all pressed into place, again, we're not using the screw with the lock nut on it, the blue Loctite on it. We're using the regular, just black ones, of which there should be many more. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our screws. We're going to put it in the other side. We're going to use our screwdriver, and we're just going to tighten it down. And what that's going to do is that's going to pull this nut into place. And we'll keep turning it until we feel that nut bottom out in there. Don't have to go too tight. We don't want to over tighten these. And then we're going to take our screw back out. And we're going to repeat that for all 6 of our nuts. And when we're done, what we're going to end up with is we have all 6 nuts are pressed into this plastic piece here. Now we're going to repeat largely the same process for the other side, except instead of inserting the nut, we're going to insert the bolt. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to press the bolts through. Again, we don't want to use these ones that have the blue Loctite. We're setting those aside for later. And now to thread these in, we want to find one of these, which is a non-lock nut. You'll see the lock nuts are the larger one here. We want to use this thinner one, which is not a lock nut. That'll just make it easier to take off. So what we're going to do is we're going to thread that nut onto the backside. Oop. And the easiest way to do this is with a nut driver like this. This makes it super simple. So it's just a matter of tightening that nut all the way down, backing it off, and now we have a bolt inserted into our plastic part. You can also do this with a socket, if you have a socket set. Or another option, although it's somewhat more tedious, is to put the nut on the bolt and then hold the nut in place with a pair of needle nose pliers so it won't rotate. And then we can just use a screwdriver to drive that bolt into place. Just a lot of pieces to hold doing it that way. And now we have two halves, which are identical, by the way. These two halves are completely interchangeable, except one of them now has bolts pressed into it, and one of them now has nuts pressed into it. The next thing that we're going to do is to attach the DC motor with the planetary gearbox on it and the encoder boards. So these are the magnetic encoders which will read the position of that magnet we glued in earlier. So we're going to take our four encoder boards out. We're going to break these apart. Now taking one encoder board, one motor, and we're going to collect 4 of these screws that have the blue Loctite on them. These ones. We need 4 of those. So we're going to take our 4 bolts with Loctite. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of our halves. It actually doesn't matter which, if it's the side with the bolts or the nuts. They're completely interchangeable. We're going to take our encoder board, and it should snap on here. There's 2 little alignment pins that'll guide it into place. Then we're going to take our motor, place it through the hole here so it sits on top like this. And now we can rotate that so you can see the bolt holes for the motor lining up there. It's very hard to see on camera, but in person, it's pretty easy to see when those line up. Now we're going to take our bolts, drop them in there, and tighten everything into place. And I'm not tightening these quite all the way until I get all 4 in. I'm just tightening them a little bit tight. And then once I get all 4 in, I'm going to go back around and tighten them up all the way. Now we're going to repeat these steps of inserting the bolts and nuts, attaching the motor and the encoder for all 4 of our arms. So the 4 of these came together quite quickly for me. So I think my glue is not quite dry. We really want to let the glue dry for a few hours before we start working with those parts. So I'm actually going to set these aside for now, and I'm going to work on the sled and come back to the arms. You have the option to just take a break here or work on something else, or if you started your glue earlier or the step took a little bit longer, you might be ready to keep going with the parts that are gluing. I'm going to set these aside for right now, and I'm going to do the sled step next. So next we're going to install this belt guard on the arm, and this attaches just like this. So it's got this sort of side up and these little feet down, and this is attaching to the arm, which doesn't have the motor attached to it. The purpose of this belt guard is the belt will run underneath here, and it'll keep the belt from being able to get into the gears. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to drop in our nuts here. And we want to be using the regular bolts with no Loctite. That's true in this step and every following step. We only use those ones with the Loctite for the motors. might help to give these nuts a little bit of a push down just so they can engage a little bit easier. Oh, I almost forgot something. One more thing we need to do is we need to add our bearings here. It doesn't really matter what order we do this in. It's a little bit easier if we do it first, but we'll put a bearing in there, put another one in that front spot. Boom. Okay, so we got our first bolt in. Drop our next one in there. Give it a little. I think this one didn't actually engage. And there we go, this guy's complete. Something to note here is there's a pretty tight tolerance between this part and the gear. So when the gear is on here, when this gear part is on here, it's going to, sorry, it's actually going to be like this. When the gear is on here, like this, you can see there's pretty tight tolerance between that part we just installed and this gear. And if you find that the gear is not free to spin, if it's clicking, it might be engaging with one of these corners here. And you can fix that just by loosening up those 3 bolts we put in place just now and basically shifting this thing around slightly. So just keep that in mind. You can do that once the arm is fully assembled. It doesn't require taking anything apart. So just keep an eye out for that. If you're finding you're having a clearance issue right there, the solution is these 3 bolts we just put in place. Oh, I lost my bearing. Now we're going to repeat that process for all 4 arms. Now that we've got our belt guard installed here, we can go ahead and start installing our spool with the belt on it. I have made a big mess of mine. So I'm just going to coil some of the belts up here on the spool just to make things a little bit easier for myself while I'm working with it. I'm not going to coil it all the way on. I'm just going to coil it sort of, a good amount on. And then I'm going to take my belt, the 2 sides are up there, and I'm going to pass it through my, under my belt guard and out this slot in the front. I'm just going to pull that through. Trying to keep things generally neat. Pull it out. There we go. Now I have my spool with my belt. This could be a good time to check to make sure my belt guard isn't messing with the teeth on my belt there, on my spool there. And now I'm going to do that for the other ones as well. The next step that we're going to do is to complete the other half of our arms. What we're going to need to do that is our drive gears, which have this D-shaped opening, and our small silver set screws. There will be more than 4 of these in your hardware bag, but we just need 4 of them. We will also need the small Torx wrench here. So place the set screw on the Torx wrench, just start it a little bit into the gear there, not so much that it sticks into the inside and prevents it from going on the motor. Then we're going to drop this onto the motor, and we're going to tighten it up. Next, we're going to add a bearing here. We're going to repeat that for all 4 arms. At this step, we would also like to add 2 more bearings here and here. Next, we're going to bring the 2 halves of our arm together. We're going to start that process with the lower half of our arm here, and we're going to begin by adding 2 bearings here and here. Put one in there, put one in there. Next, we're going to take our roller, and this is very important. This is the roller with the magnet in it. So we're going to see the magnet there, and that's going to go on the side which has the belt teeth. So we're going to place the magnet so that the one that has the magnet is engaging with the belt teeth. Then we're going to take one of our other rollers that does not have a magnet. We're going to place that on the other side. So it should look like this. Next, we're going to grab the other half, and we're going to take our idler gear, which is this guy here, and we're going to place that here so that these teeth are engaged together. Then we can take our 2 halves, and this can be a little tricky, but it just takes some finagling. We're going to bring them together, and I like to roll from the back forward. So we're going to start back here. And one of the first things that usually is not quite engaged is the teeth on this gear will be not engaged with the idler gear. So we can fix that with a little bit of a wiggle. That'll get us closer. Next thing that we need to check is this here. So we can check that that guy's engaged. And finally, we need to get our rollers up front engaged. Once we've got everything lined up, it should all come together. Now, I like to tighten these up again in the same order, sort of working my way from the back forward. Finally, we got to put in these 2 bolts up front. And I find that it's tough to get the lock nuts to engage on these ones, so I'm using these regular non-locking nuts here. Drop one in there. It can help to use a wrench from the bottom, sort of guide it into place. Give it a couple of little taps. Make sure it's seated properly. Then we'll feed a bolt up from the bottom. And we'll repeat that on the other side. And now our arm is complete. Now that we have our arms complete, we need to install the belt end, which is the other end of the belt. Those are these pieces here. We're going to take these out. And the way this works is the belt is going to fold over and engage on itself, and then go in here. And we don't want it sticking out too much beyond the end of the thing here. And I think the easiest way to do this is to fold it over and kind of start from this end, because we've got this nice ramp in here. So we'll fold over and kind of slide our way forward. And this can be a little tricky. So we folded over, we slid forward, now it's in one side. Now we take our second half and we want to kind of rock our way forward, clamping these together. Now we've got our two halves together. What we need to do is take a non-locking nut, one of these smaller nuts, and a regular bolt, and bolt these two halves together. It can be a little tricky to get the bolt to go through that hole. So I like to start out before I put the bolt through by putting the wrench here through, just to sort of clear out an opening. Be a little careful not to poke yourself in the hand when you're sticking it through. But that'll clear out a channel for our bolt to then pass through. And I'm pushing as I turn here to get the bolt to thread through. Put our nut on the far side. Now we have our belt end installed. And you can see how there's a little bit of a tail sticking out here. That's okay. If you have much more than this, you want to trim it off. Because when this retracts in here, we don't want that little tail to get sucked into the rollers in there.